What kind of daughter swaps her father's life-saving medication for sugar pills, watching him wither away while she smiles sweetly across the dinner table? It hadn't started with betrayal. For most of my life, I believed my daughter, Rachel, was the one person I could trust. My wife had passed years ago, and the house echoed with silence until Rachel moved back in to help take care of me. I thought it was love. I thought it was loyalty. What I didn't know was that beneath her caring smiles and gentle touches, there was a darker plan brewing, one I wouldn't discover until it nearly cost me my life. It began with the pills. Every morning, Rachel would hand me my heart medication with a glass of water, her voice soft and encouraging. "Here, Dad. Don't forget these. Doctor's orders, remember?" She'd give me a kiss on the cheek, and I would swallow them down without a second thought. For weeks, I trusted her, even as I felt my chest grow tighter and my breathing more ragged. "Rachel," I told her one evening as I slumped in my chair, sweat dripping down my brow, "I don't think the medicine's working anymore." She knelt beside me, her hand cool against my forehead. "Oh, Dad, don't worry. Sometimes the body just needs time to adjust. You'll be fine. Trust me." But I wasn't fine. The fatigue grew unbearable. Some mornings, I couldn't even make it to the porch without collapsing back into bed. My old doctor, Dr. Henderson, seemed puzzled when I described my worsening symptoms. "Strange," he muttered, flipping through my chart. "You've been on this medication for years, and it always stabilized you. Are you sure you've been taking it regularly?" I looked at him, insulted. "Of course I have. My daughter gives them to me every day." His brow furrowed, but he said nothing. Instead, he scheduled more tests. Tests that I never made it to because Rachel always found reasons to reschedule or drive me next week when you re-stronger. I trusted her. God help me, I trusted her. The breaking point came one night when I woke in a cold sweat, gasping for air, convinced I wouldn't see the morning. Stumbling into the kitchen, I went for the pill bottle myself, desperate for relief. But when I unscrewed the cap and poured the contents into my palm, what tumbled out wasn't the pale blue tablets I'd swallowed for years. Instead, small white pills rolled across the counter. Chalky, identical, and utterly unfamiliar. My heart froze. I picked one up, held it under the light, and realized instantly they weren't my medication. They weren't anything at all. "Rachel!" My voice cracked through the empty house, furious and frightened all at once. She came running, her face painted with feigned concern. "Dad, what's wrong? Sit down, you're not well. What the hell have you been giving me?" I held the pill up like a weapon, my hand trembling. Her eyes flicked to it, just for a moment, before she smiled. "It's your prescription, Dad. You must be confused." Confused? My chest heaved. "I've been taking these for weeks. These aren't my meds. They're—" I crushed one between my fingers. Powder smeared across my palm. "They're nothing." For the first time, her mask cracked, just slightly. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and her voice dropped low. "You're tired, Dad. You don't know what you're saying." But I knew. Oh, I knew. That night, while Rachel slept soundly in the guest room, I sat awake with the pill bottle in front of me. I counted every piece, studied every mark, and confirmed what my gut already screamed: sugar pills. She had been feeding me sugar pills while telling me it was medicine. But why? The answer came quicker than I expected. 2 days later, I overheard her on the phone in the backyard. Her voice was sharp, businesslike, nothing like the sweet daughter she played for me. "No, the will's already in place," she whispered. "Once he's gone, everything's mine. The house, the accounts, all of it. It won't be long now. The old fool's practically half dead already." The blood drained from my face. Every cough, every dizzy spell, every gasping breath, it was her doing. My own daughter wasn't caring for me. She was killing me, slowly, methodically, to inherit everything I had left. I didn't confront her. Not then. Instead, I started my own plan. While she thought I was fading, I grew sharper. I pretended weakness, slurring my speech, walking with heavier steps, letting her believe her plan was working. But in secret, I replaced the sugar pills back with my real prescription, bought directly from the pharmacy and hidden away in my study drawer. Strength began to return. My breath steadied. My chest no longer felt like a ticking bomb. And then I began writing. Every detail, every overheard word, every night of agony. I wrote it all down and prepared a sealed envelope addressed to the local police department. But the envelope wasn't all I left behind. In my will, I had Rachel's name struck out, her share erased completely. Instead, I replaced it with one item only, an envelope waiting for her at the lawyer S. office. The day finally came. When I died, Rachel would receive nothing but a note, neatly typed and signed by me. Rachel, while you thought you were clever enough to swap my pills, I was clever enough to swap your inheritance. This letter has already been shared with the police. Consider this your last gift from your father, the truth. But that day wasn't here yet, and before it arrived, I intended to watch her squirm. Rachel, I said one afternoon, feigning weakness as she brought me tea. I changed my will yesterday. I wanted to make sure you were taken care of. Her eyes glittered with greed she couldn't quite hide. Oh, Dad, that's so thoughtful. You don't need to worry about me. But she did worry, and soon enough she would worry more than she ever imagined. Because the next time she tried to kill me with sugar, the cops would already be waiting. The night before everything unraveled, I sat in the dim glow of my study lamp, hands trembling, not from weakness, but from anticipation. My real medication coursed through me now, steadying my heartbeat like a drum. The letter to the police was sealed, tucked inside a larger manila envelope with Rachel's name scrawled across it in bold black ink. Inside that same envelope was the proof. Photographs of the sugar pills, copies of my medical records, and even a small recording device ID hidden under the porch railing to capture her incriminating phone calls. I'd spent weeks gathering it all, working in silence, enduring her fake smiles while my fury burned low and quiet like coals. Every time she pressed a glass of water into my hand and said, "Here, Dad," I thought of how she'd soon be the one facing judgment. Every time she reminded me about my doctor's orders, I thought of the cuffs clicking shut around her wrists. But I couldn't let her suspect, not yet. "Dad," she said the next morning at breakfast, setting a plate of eggs and toast in front of me. Her voice was sugary sweet, but her eyes were cold and calculating. "You're looking a little better today. I'm glad. Maybe you'll even feel strong enough to sign some paperwork later, just some housekeeping for the will." I forced a weak laugh, clutching my chest for effect. "Ah, you know me, Rachel. Paperwork exhausts me, but we'll get to it soon." She smiled, but I caught the flicker of irritation on her face before she masked it again. Later that afternoon, I called Dr. Henderson from the payphone outside the grocery store, a place Rachel would never think to follow me. My voice was low, urgent. "I need you to be at my house tomorrow at 3, I said. "Bring a nurse. Bring someone from the police if you can." "Police?" Henderson asked sharply. "What's going on, Mr. Callahan?" "I'll explain tomorrow," I said, my hand tightening on the receiver. "But I'll say this much now. My daughter has been trying to kill me." He was silent for a beat, then his voice came back grim. "Understood. We'll be there." I hung up, my pulse steady. The stage was set. That night, Rachel came into my room holding my medicine. Her silhouette was framed in the doorway, her hand gentle on the knob. "Time for your pills, Dad," she murmured. I sat up slowly, staring at her. "You know, Rachel, I was thinking about Mom tonight, about how much she loved you." Her smile softened a fraction. "She did. She always wanted me to take care of you, too." "Yes," I said, taking the pill bottle from her hand and turning it over in my fingers. "She did. I swallowed one of my own hidden pills instead, palming the sugar pill when she wasn't looking. She watched me closely like a cat watching a mouse. "Good," she said. "Get some rest, Dad. Tomorrow's an important day." I nodded, feigning fatigue. "Yes, it is." When she left, I slipped the sugar pill into a plastic bag and placed it with the rest of my evidence. Tomorrow, the trap would spring. At exactly 3 o'clock the next afternoon, Rachel stood in the living room wearing a crisp blouse and a polished smile. "You ready to go over that paperwork, Dad?" she asked, her voice bright. I shuffled into the room slowly, leaning on my cane, looking every bit the frail old man she thought I was. "Oh, yes," I said, lowering myself into the chair. "But first, there's someone I'd like you to meet." Her brow furrowed. "Meet? Who?" The front door opened behind her, and in walked Dr. Henderson, a uniformed officer, and a woman carrying a clipboard, the nurse he'd promised. Rachel's face went pale. "Rachel Callahan?" the officer said, stepping forward. "We need to ask you some questions regarding your father's medication." "What?" She laughed, but it was too high-pitched, too brittle. "This must be some mistake." "No mistake," I said quietly, pulling the manila envelope from my lap. "I've been documenting everything. The sugar pills, the phone calls, the changes in my health, all of it." She turned to me, her eyes wide with something between fear and fury. "Dad, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I said, my voice stronger than it had been in months. "You tried to kill me for my money." Her mask crumbled then, the tears coming not from guilt, but from the realization that her plan had failed. "I was only doing what was fair," she snapped. "After everything you gave to charities and strangers, what about me? Don't I deserve something?" "You deserved my trust," I said coldly. "And you had it, until you traded it for greed." The officer stepped forward. "Miss Callahan, we're going to need you to come with us." She turned to me one last time, her face contorted. "You'll regret this, Dad." But I didn't. As they led her out of the house, I felt no triumph, only a weary kind of sorrow. She had been my daughter once. She had been my world, and now she was just another criminal led away in handcuffs. After the door closed, Dr. Henderson sat beside me, his voice gentle. "Are you all right?" I exhaled, my hands shaking as the adrenaline drained away. "I will be," I said. "It's over now." But it wasn't entirely over, not yet. Rachel didn't know that the will had already been executed, leaving her nothing but the note in my lawyer's office. She didn't know that even if she tried to challenge it, the evidence against her was airtight. And when she finally opened that envelope, when she read the note I had left her, she would understand just how completely she'd lost. Because in the end, I hadn't just saved my life. I'd made sure she would never profit from trying to take it. And as the police car rolled down the driveway, I closed my eyes and whispered to myself, "Goodbye, Rachel." For the first time in months, I breathed easy. The police car's taillights disappeared down the long gravel driveway, leaving the house in silence. For a moment, I sat there in the old armchair, staring at the empty space Rachel had occupied only minutes before. The quiet felt heavier than ever. You would think I'd feel victorious, that I'd want to celebrate, but instead, there was only an ache in my chest that medicine couldn't cure. Dr. Henderson placed a hand on my shoulder. "I'll stay for a bit if you'd like. I don't want you alone after all that." I nodded, my throat tight. "Thank you, Doctor. Alone is not easy these days." The nurse busied herself in the kitchen, preparing tea. Her clinking of cups was the only sound that filled the house. "Do you think she'll be convicted?" I asked, finally, my voice breaking the silence. "With the evidence you've gathered?" Henderson shook his head gravely. "There's little chance she won't be. This wasn't just negligence. It was calculated, intentional. I'm sorry, Mr. Callahan." I closed my eyes. I'd imagined this moment, fantasized about it when I was at my weakest, gasping for air while Rachel smiled. But the reality carried no joy, just grief. That night, when the house was empty again, I wandered through the rooms as though seeing them for the first time. The pictures on the walls, Rachel at age 6 with ribbons in her hair, Rachel at her graduation, Rachel holding her mother's hand at the beach, mocked me now. I touched the frames, my fingers trembling. "Where did you go, my little girl?" I whispered. But the only answer was silence. The following week, the lawyer summoned me to his office. A tall man with steel gray hair, Mr. Bennett, greeted me warmly. "Mr. Callahan, I take it you're here about the adjustments you made to your will?" "Yes." I sat down heavily in the leather chair across from him. "I need to know everything is secure, that there's no way she can twist it in her favor." Bennett slid a folder across the desk. "It's all airtight. Rachel has been formally removed as a beneficiary. In fact, the only thing she's due to receive is the letter you left for her. We'll see to it she gets it at the appropriate time." I felt a strange satisfaction in that. Not joy, not revenge, just finality. Good. That's all I wanted. But Rachel wasn't one to accept defeat quietly. 2 weeks later, while she was out on bail awaiting her court date, I received a letter in the mail. The envelope was smudged and wrinkled, her handwriting scrawled in a furious rush. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "You've ruined me. Do you think I'll sit back and let you watch me rot in prison? You're wrong. If I go down, I'll make sure you're dragged with me. You'll regret crossing me, Dad." No signature. None needed. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the words until they blurred. For a moment, fear gripped me. Rachel had always been clever, resourceful. If she'd gone this far once, what was stopping her from going further? That night, I checked the locks on every door twice. I kept the phone close to my bed, and I began to wonder, had I really won? Or had I simply bought myself more time before her next move? The trial was scheduled for 6 weeks later. The prosecutor called me personally. "Mr. Callahan, your testimony will be critical. We have the recordings, the pill analysis, the will changes. It's all damning. But the jury needs to hear from you. They need to understand the betrayal." I agreed, though the thought of sitting in front of Rachel again made my stomach churn. The day of the trial, I wore my best suit, the same one I'd worn to her graduation years ago. It still fit, though it felt heavier on my shoulders now. As I took the stand, I caught her eye across the courtroom. She looked nothing like the daughter I remembered. Hollow-eyed, furious, her once bright face twisted by bitterness. "Mr. Callahan," the prosecutor began, "can you describe for the court what your daughter did to you?" My voice cracked as I spoke. "She replaced my heart medication with sugar pills. She watched me grow weaker every day, and all the while she smiled and told me everything was fine." Rachel shifted in her seat, her jaw clenched. "And why would she do this?" "Because she wanted my money," I said flatly. "She wanted me dead, so she could inherit everything I'd worked for." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The judge banged his gavel for order. Rachel's lawyer tried to spin it, claiming stress, confusion, even suggesting I was senile, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for only 2 hours before returning with their verdict. Guilty. When the judge read the sentence, 15 years, Rachel's face went pale. She turned to me one last time, her lips forming words I couldn't quite hear, though I knew what they were. "I hate you." The gavel fell. The case was closed. But as the bailiff led her away, I felt no triumph, just loss. That night, I sat alone in the house, Rachel's childhood photos still hanging on the walls. I thought of the little girl who used to curl up in my lap and beg for one more bedtime story. The daughter who used to hold my hand when we crossed the street. Somewhere along the way, that child had been swallowed by greed, and all I could do was mourn her. But I also knew this: she would never hurt me again. And in that truth, at least, I finally found peace. The first few weeks after Rachel's sentencing were strangely quiet. Too quiet. For the first time in months, I could wake up without the fear of her shadow looming at my bedside, without wondering if the next pill she handed me would be my last. Yet peace felt foreign. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind rattling the shutters made me think of her, made me half expect her to burst through the door with that venomous glare in her eyes. I tried to distract myself. I took long walks around the property, reintroduced myself to neighbors I hadn't seen in years, even started tinkering with my late wife's old garden. But no matter what I did, Rachel haunted me. Not as a ghost, but as the living, breathing daughter sitting behind prison walls, burning with resentment. And then the letters began. The first came in a plain envelope, stamped from the county jail. My heart thudded as I slid it open. Inside, her handwriting sprawled across the page in jagged lines. You think you've won? You haven't. Prison doesn't scare me. You should be the one who's afraid. You betrayed your own blood. Blood always finds a way back. I crumpled the letter and shoved it into the drawer, but more followed. Every week, sometimes 2 or 3, each more venomous than the last. She blamed me for everything. For her arrest, for her ruined life, for not loving her enough. She promised revenge, even from behind bars. The prosecutor advised me to keep them. They'll show the parole board her lack of remorse, he said. But don't let them eat you alive. Easier said than done. One night, unable to sleep, I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by her letters. I read them all again, one by one, searching for something. Regret, sorrow, even the faintest trace of the daughter I once knew. But there was nothing, only bitterness. And then I noticed something different in the last letter. Not a threat this time, but a name. You'll meet him soon. He's everything you're not. Strong, loyal. When I can't get to you, he will. My blood ran cold. Was it a bluff? Or had she found someone on the inside willing to act on her behalf? I reported it to the warden, who promised to investigate. But the words stuck in my mind, a dark cloud over every step I took. Weeks passed, and I began to let my guard down, until one evening, just after sunset, I heard the crunch of footsteps outside my house. I froze. No one was expected. Grabbing the cane by the door, I peered through the window. A man stood by the porch steps, tall, broad-shouldered, with a shaved head and prison tattoos creeping up his neck. He wasn't from the neighborhood. He wasn't lost. He was waiting. My heart pounded, but I forced my voice steady. Who's there? The man smiled, slow and unsettling. Message from Rachel, he said. I tightened my grip on the cane. My daughter might have been behind bars, but her reach was longer than I thought. And for the first time since she'd been locked away, I realized the war between us wasn't over at all. It had only just begun. The man's words lingered in the night air like smoke. Message from Rachel. Every instinct told me to slam the door and call the sheriff, but something inside me, a stubborn, reckless spark, refused to show fear. Instead, I stepped onto the porch, cane in hand, and stared him down. You tell my daughter, I said, voice hard, that she's finished. She had her chance to kill me and she failed. Sending lapdogs won't change that. The man chuckled, low and cruel. She said you'd be stubborn, said you'd think you won. But she also said you're weak. You won't last long without looking over your shoulder. He stepped closer, and for a moment I saw the glint of something metallic in his hand. A knife? The porch light caught it, quick as lightning. My breath hitched, but before fear could paralyze me, I tightened my grip on the cane. This wasn't just wood. Inside, it was reinforced with steel, a gift from a war buddy years ago. I slammed the cane against the railing, the crack echoing like a gunshot. You take one more step, I growled, and you'll leave this porch in pieces. For a tense moment, neither of us moved. His eyes searched mine, and I forced myself not to blink. Finally, he smirked, spat on the ground, and backed away. "This isn't over, old man," he muttered. "Rachel always finishes what she starts." Then he disappeared into the night. I stayed frozen on the porch long after he was gone, my heart racing. The cane trembled in my grip. I'd survived assassins in the dark before, enemies I knew by name, in wars far from home. But nothing compared to this. To know my own daughter had unleashed a predator on me. It tore deeper than any battlefield wound. The next morning, I went straight to Sheriff Lawson. He listened carefully, his mustache twitching as he frowned. "We'll step up patrols near your property," he promised. "But men like that? If he's tied to Rachel, it won't stop at intimidation. She's pulling strings from inside." "Then cut the strings," I snapped. The sheriff sighed. "Not that simple. Inmates find ways, letters, phone calls, even smuggled phones. But don't worry, Mr. Callahan, we'll keep you safe." But I didn't trust safe. Not anymore. That night, I opened the drawer where Rachel's letters sat bundled with twine. I read them again, slower this time, searching for clues. And then it struck me. Each letter contained subtle patterns. Phrases repeated. Oddly specific details about places she should not have known. The old service road near the mill, the abandoned barn 3 miles east. Rachel wasn't just sending threats. She was sending instructions to someone outside. I leaned back in my chair, my blood running cold. The man on my porch wasn't random. He was following orders. I pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and began writing, my hand steady despite the storm in my chest. Not to Rachel, not to the sheriff, but to myself. A plan. Because if Rachel wanted to play this game, she'd find out she wasn't the only one who could lay traps. The next day, I returned to the porch and waited. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in bruised purples and reds. And as the shadows stretched, I whispered to the night, "Come again, whoever you are. Come again. This time I'll be ready." The second time he came, I wasn't the same man waiting helplessly on the porch. I'd spent the week preparing, every lock in the house reinforced, a shotgun cleaned and loaded behind the coat rack, motion sensors set up around the property, and the old barn converted into a decoy. If Rachel wanted to send her wolves, I'd let them circle. Then I'd show them whose teeth were sharper. It was a Tuesday night, clear sky, the moon hanging like a lantern. I heard him before I saw him. The crunch of boots on gravel, the faint metallic jingle of something clipped to his belt. This time, he didn't come alone. Another figure moved behind him, smaller, wiry, with a hood pulled low. I stayed in the shadows of the porch, cane in one hand, shotgun resting just out of sight. "Old man," the tattooed one called, his voice sharp, mocking. "We know you're in there. Rachel says you've got something that belongs to her." I stepped forward just enough to let the light catch me. All Rachel ever owned from me was my trust, and she threw that away. The second figure laughed. "She said you'd talk like that. Always preaching, always thinking you're in control." They started up the porch steps. My pulse slowed, not sped, as if my body knew exactly what to do. I kicked the cane forward with a crack against the step, then lifted the shotgun in one smooth motion. "Next step, and you'll be spitting splinters from your teeth," I warned. The tattooed man froze, his companion shifting uneasily. For a moment, tension snapped tight between us, ready to explode. Then the smaller one hissed, "Not worth it. Not now. Let's go." They backed off, but the tattooed man grinned at me, cold and hungry. "You can't watch your back forever, old man. She's not done. None of us are." They disappeared into the darkness. The silence afterward was deafening. I lowered the shotgun, my hand steady but my chest heavy. It wasn't fear I felt. It was confirmation. Rachel had allies, dangerous ones, and they weren't going to stop until either she got what she wanted or I made sure she couldn't reach beyond those prison walls again. The next morning, I drove to Sheriff Lawson's office, the letters clutched in my hand. "It's not just threats anymore," I told him. "She's running a network from inside. She's sending coded instructions in her letters. I need you to take these seriously, or the next time, blood will be on your hands." The sheriff's jaw tightened as he scanned the pages. "Damn, you might be right." "Might?" I snapped. "I am right. I need her communication cut off. No letters, no phone calls, no visitors, isolation." "That's a tall order," Lawson muttered, but he made a note. "I'll push it up the chain." But I wasn't about to leave my fate in bureaucrats' hands. That night, I sat at my desk and began drafting my own kind of letter, not to Rachel, but to the people she was trying to command. I mimicked her handwriting, her turns of phrase, the rhythm of her threats, and I crafted a message that would split her pack apart. Plans changed. "Don't trust anyone but me. Anyone else claiming they speak for me is lying. Do not move until I say so. Betrayal will be punished." When it was done, I made sure it landed where her allies would find it, taped under a loose board at the mill she'd mentioned in one of her coded notes. A place I knew they checked. Then I waited. Days passed with no visitors, no footsteps in the gravel, no messages whispered in the dark. The silence stretched, heavy but welcome. If my forgery worked, I'd sown doubt among her men. And doubt is poison to loyalty. But even as I let myself exhale, I knew this wasn't over. Rachel was clever, relentless, and fueled by hatred. A daughter who could swap her father's medicine for sugar pills wouldn't stop at prison walls. And so, as I sat on the porch one cool evening, shotgun across my lap, I whispered into the night the same way I once whispered on battlefields long ago. "Come again, Rachel. Send whoever you want. I'll be ready." The quiet held for almost a month, long enough to make me wonder if my forged letter had done its work, long enough for me to almost believe the storm had passed. But storms don't vanish, they gather, waiting. It was a Sunday morning when the next blow fell. Sheriff Lawson pulled up my drive, his cruiser crunching over gravel, dust kicking up behind it. He didn't bother with pleasantries. The moment he stepped onto the porch, his eyes told me everything. "They found a guard," he said grimly. "Dead, in his car outside the prison. Stabbed. Wallet still there. But in his pocket, a note." My throat tightened. "What did it say?" Lawson's lips pressed into a thin line. "Your name, Mr. Callahan, just your name, and one word under it, unfinished." The air seemed to thicken around me. "She's reaching out again. Even locked up, she's killing people." "Not just that," Lawson said. "She's recruiting. We've been hearing chatter. Rachel's built herself a little following inside. Promises of money, promises of favors when she gets out. And now it looks like she's managed to plant someone on the outside, too." I gripped the porch rail until my knuckles whitened. My own daughter, carving an empire out of her prison cell, and all of it centered on me. That night, the fear returned in a new form. Not of Rachel's men breaking through my door, but of what she was becoming. A woman with nothing but time, intelligence, and rage could turn prison into her kingdom. And I was the dragon she kept promising her soldiers they would slay. I didn't sleep. Instead, I laid out maps of the property, checked every corner of the house, replaced weak boards on the barn, and strung tripwires that would rattle cans if anyone approached. The old soldier in me had been dormant too long, but Rachel had woken him. 3 nights later, the cans clattered. I grabbed the shotgun and moved to the window. Shapes, 3 of them, crept along the fence line. The moonlight caught metal in their hands. Not guns, tools, crowbars, knives. They were coming to tear me open like a locked chest. My heart steadied, not fear this time, resolve. I waited until they crossed the first tripwire near the garden shed, a taut cord tied to an old paint can filled with rocks. The can tumbled, clanging loud enough to wake the dead. The intruders froze. That was all the time I needed. I stepped onto the porch, the shotgun aimed squarely at them. "That's far enough," the tallest one cursed. "Don't bluff, old man. You won't pull that trigger." I fired into the dirt 2 feet from his boots. The ground exploded, dirt spraying his legs. He stumbled back with a yelp. "Next shot won't be dirt," I growled. They hesitated, the night air thick with silence. Then the smallest one spat into the grass. "Rachel says you're weak, just an old fool hiding behind a gun." "Rachel doesn't know me anymore," I said, my voice hard as iron. "And if you don't run right now, the sheriff will be cleaning your bodies off my lawn." They backed away slowly, then bolted into the tree line, swallowed by the dark. I didn't chase them. I didn't need to. Their message was clear, and mine had been louder. When the sheriff arrived minutes later, lights flashing across the yard, he shook his head. "She won't stop, will she?" "No," I said, my eyes on the tree line where they'd disappeared. "But neither will I." For the first time, I realized the truth. Rachel and I were locked in a war. Not father and daughter anymore, but predator and prey. And if she thought age or blood would make me weak, she was wrong. She had declared herself my enemy, and enemies I knew how to deal with. The sheriff's cruiser lights finally faded from my driveway, leaving me alone again with the shadows. I stood on the porch long after, the shotgun cooling in my hands, the smell of spent gunpowder still sharp in my nose. The night was silent, but I knew silence could be deceiving. Rachel's war wasn't over. She was clever, and she had always been patient. If she couldn't take me by force, she would find another way, through fear, through manipulation, through bending people to her will. The next morning, a letter arrived. Not from Rachel this time, but from my lawyer, Mr. Bennett. The envelope was official, the paper thick and crisp. Mr. Callahan. It read, "A petition has been filed challenging the validity of your will. The claimant argues you are not of sound mind, influenced by delusion and paranoia. The claimant is, of course, your daughter, Rachel." I crushed the paper in my fist, fury rising like fire in my chest. From behind bars, she was trying to twist the courts into her weapon. She wasn't just attacking my life now. She was attacking my legacy, my very sanity. That afternoon, I sat in Bennett's office, my cane across my knees. He adjusted his glasses and sighed. "It's a desperate move. The court doesn't usually take such petitions seriously, especially with her conviction fresh. But she has managed to hire an attorney, paid for, we suspect, by her new friends. If she can convince a judge you're unstable, she might force an evaluation, and that opens doors we'd rather stay closed." I leaned forward, my voice low and hard. "Then we close them. For good." Bennett studied me. "What are you planning?" "Not planning," I said. "Preparing." That night, I went back through every letter Rachel had sent, every note of venom, every coded phrase. She thought she was clever, but cleverness leaves patterns, and patterns can be turned against you. I began drafting my own responses, not to her directly, but to her network. I forged letters in her handwriting again, only this time with greater care. Messages designed to make her soldiers doubt her. "One of you is betraying me. Don't trust the promises I made before. Everything has changed. The old man is smarter than you think. If you fail again, don't come back to me." Each letter I planted carefully, slipped under the mill's floorboards, tucked behind the old church pews where her men gathered, left in places only they would look. Like poison in the bloodstream, suspicion would spread. Within a week, the sheriff told me 2 of her allies had turned on each other. One in the hospital, the other in custody. Rachel's army was rotting from the inside, and she didn't even know it was me holding the scalpel. But she was still dangerous. 2 days before the court hearing, another package arrived. No return address. Inside was a photograph. Me standing on my porch with the shotgun, taken from the tree line. The message scrawled across the back in Rachel's hand. Even when you think you're winning, I'm watching. I sat at the table, staring at the photo until my knuckles went white. She was tightening the noose, daring me to make the next move, and I would. Because this war had dragged me back into a world I thought I'd left behind long ago. A world of shadows, strategies, and survival. Rachel wanted to fight like an enemy? Then I would treat her like one. And when the time came, father or not, I would end this war the only way wars ever end, completely. The courthouse smelled of old wood and coffee, a bitter, familiar scent that made my palms clammy as I gripped the edge of the witness table. Papers lay in neat stacks before me. Medical records, affidavits, the letters Rachel had sent, the photocopies of her threats. Across the room, behind a half wall, I could see her. Smaller now, shoulders hunched, the fire in her eyes contained but still burning. Her lawyer met my gaze once, cold and practiced, and then looked away. "Mr. Callahan," the judge said, voice echoing, "we'll proceed." "State your full name for the record," the prosecutor asked. "Thomas Callahan." My voice sounded steady, which calmed me a little. 72 years old. He began with the easy questions. My health history, my prescriptions, when I first suspected something was wrong. I answered plainly. I let the courtroom hear the simple, devastating arc of trust betrayed. The way I relied on my daughter, how my chest tightened, how my doctor's concern grew. The jury watched my hands as I spoke. I watched them in return, letting the truth sink in slow and sure. On cross-examination, Rachel's attorney tried his best to paint me as frail and confused. "Isn't it true, Mr. Callahan," he said, "that in recent months you've been forgetful? That your memory is poor?" "No," I replied flatly. "I remember exactly what she did." "And are you certain you didn't, perhaps, misidentify the pills?" "I identified them the night I poured them into my hand," I said. "They were wrong. I knew." He pushed harder, circling, lancing. "Is it possible, Mr. Callahan, that you imagined threats? That you misinterpreted your daughter's concern?" The question was a blade, but I refused to flinch. "I have the recordings. I have the pills. The man who came to my porch has been identified. The guard who died had a note in his pocket with my name. This is not imagination." The courtroom hummed with whispers. Rachel's face darkened. She mouthed something I couldn't read. The judge called for order. Later, when I left the stand, I felt hollow and raw, like a man who'd been pulled through winter. Bennett met me outside the courtroom, his hand on my elbow. "You did well," he said quietly. "We've beaten back their attempt to paint you unstable." "Thank you," I said, but in the back of my mind, a different worry gnawed. Winning the legal battle didn't end the war. The guard's murder proved Rachel's reach. Her network was willing to spill blood for her. That night, Sheriff Lawson called with news that turned my stomach. "We picked up chatter that means trouble," he said. "There's talk of a move tonight. Something big. We can't leave you unprotected." "Tell your men to be outside, visible," I said. "No vans parked near the tree line. If they show, they should know we're watching." He hesitated. "You sure you want to be here when it happens?" "No," I said, "but I'm not running." The first shadow slipped across my yard near midnight, a small, silent thing that moved like it had practiced at being unseen. A second followed, then a third. They thought to come under cover of darkness, to take advantage of the sheriff's stretched resources. They'd miscalculated. Lights flooded the yard as deputies moved into position. An unmarked cruiser cut off the road, headlights blinding. The men froze, confusion rippling through them. But then, the impossible happened. An explosion of motion from the tree line as a figure broke cover and sprinted toward the porch. He aimed for the door in a straight, brutal line, and behind him, another man unfurled a knife. My hands moved before fear could. I tested the trigger with my finger and fired. The shot roared, not at them, but into the air above their heads, a warning that cracked like thunder. The runner stumbled, eyes wide, and in that instant, Sheriff Lawson and his deputies surged. They took two of the attackers down quickly. One bled and cursed, the other screamed and tried to run. The runner, the one heading straight for me, fell forward, sprawling at the porch steps, a knife skittering away into the dirt. A deputy stood over him, boots planted on his shoulder. "Stay down," he barked. When the dust cleared, I stepped out into the cold night air. The man at my feet stared up at me, young, terrified, his face tattooed with gang marks and jailhouse ink. He spat up dirt. "Rachel sent me," he rasped. "She said bring the old man in a bag." "You're caught," I said, and it felt neither cruel nor kind. It was simply true. "Why?" His eyes flicked to the porch lights and then to the sheriff. "Money." He gurgled a laugh, half mad. "Promises. Protection later. She's got people, man. She said—" He broke off as if the words left a bad taste. They bundled him into the cruiser and read him his rights. A deputy handed me a smudged photograph and a torn piece of paper they had found near the scene. An address, a name I recognized from one of Rachel's letters. Her web had a weak thread left, and we'd snapped it. The next morning, I sat with Bennett over tea. "They'll push for harsher conditions now," he said. "This will help. The judge will see the pattern." "Good," I said. "Lock the web down." But even as the law tightened its grip on Rachel's reach, part of me recognized a new, colder truth. This was not only about protection or punishment. It was about facing what she had become and deciding what to do next. I could pursue her until the last of her allies were in cuffs, drag the case through appeals and parole boards until my hands were empty. Or I could try, somehow, to cut the last threads of love that bound me to her. The memories, the photographs, the ghost of the little girl in the sun. That afternoon, alone in my study, I opened the bottom drawer and took out the small envelope I'd prepared long before, a copy of the letter ID left for the police, another copy filed with Bennett, and a final note addressed to Rachel. I sat with the pen hovering over that last page for a long time. When I finally wrote, it was not a plea or a condemnation, but a stone-cold ledger of truth. "You chose your path," I wrote. "I chose mine." Outside, the house creaked as the wind moved through the eaves. The war had cost us both everything. In the quiet that followed, I understood something I hadn't allowed myself to before. Winning doesn't always mean healing. It sometimes means surviving. And surviving meant finishing the hard work of untangling a life from betrayal, one careful, ruthless step at a time. The letter sat on my desk for 3 days, a silent weight. I read it each morning and again before bed, debating whether sending it would free me or bind me even tighter to Rachel's madness. On the 4th day, I decided. I sealed it, stamped it, and gave it to Bennett with strict instructions. "Deliver this only after her next appeal fails," I said. "Not before." He studied me carefully, but he nodded. "Understood." I went home that night lighter, but not free, because surviving Rachel meant living in a strange half-world, part vigilance, part mourning. I could tend the garden, mend fences, even share coffee with neighbors, but behind every small comfort lurked the question, what will she try next? And she did try again, though not with knives or gangs. The next strike was words. 6 months after the attack on my porch, a reporter appeared at my gate. A young woman, notepad in hand, her voice honeyed with rehearsed sympathy. "Mr. Callahan, I'm writing a feature for the paper. It's about wrongful convictions. Your daughter's case has been cited by activists as an example of judicial overreach." My grip tightened on the gate. Overreach. "She claims she was framed," the reporter pressed gently. "That you're suffering from early dementia. That your testimony was manipulated. She says you confused sugar pills with your actual medication and imagined threats that didn't exist." I laughed, harsh, humorless. "She's still playing the same game. And you believe her?" "I believe there are always two sides," the reporter said, though I caught the gleam of ambition in her eyes. "Would you care to respond for the record?" I leaned in close, my voice low. "Yes. The record is this. She tried to kill me. I lived. That's the only story worth printing." I shut the gate. She scribbled furiously as I walked back to the porch, but I didn't look back. That night, I watched the evening news. Sure enough, Rachel's claims ran as headlines. "Woman claims innocence. Father unfit witness." Seeing her face on the screen again, pleading her case with a false softness, sent bile up my throat. Sheriff Lawson called shortly after. "Don't let it get to you. She's trying to control the narrative, but the evidence is solid." "Evidence doesn't stop lies from spreading," I muttered. "No," Lawson agreed, "but truth lasts longer." I wanted to believe that. Weeks passed, and the noise died down. Her appeal was denied, as Bennett predicted. Still, I couldn't ignore the gnawing inside me. The world might call her a criminal, but I remembered her laughter as a child, the way she used to squeeze my hand too tightly when we crossed the street. That daughter and this woman, they weren't the same, and yet they were. One evening, while sorting through old boxes in the attic, I found her childhood diary. Pink cover, doodles in the margins, a lock, long broken. Against my better judgment, I read, "I'll be rich one day. Daddy doesn't understand money. He gives it away. But I'll know how to keep it." She'd written it at 12. My stomach turned cold. The seeds of greed had been planted early, maybe earlier than I'd ever seen. I'd thought love could smother them, but maybe I'd been blind. I sat there under the dim attic light for hours, the diary on my knees, wondering if Rachel's betrayal had been inevitable. The next morning, I made my choice. I gathered every photo of her from the walls, every ribbon, every relic. Not to burn, not to destroy, just to box away. Into storage they went, sealed and labeled, placed in the farthest corner of the attic. When I came back down, the house felt emptier, but it also felt cleaner. For the first time, I was no longer living inside her shadow. As I sat on the porch that evening, the sun setting gold across the yard, I realized something strange. The war might never truly be over, but I didn't need to keep fighting it every day. Rachel could rage in her cell, spin her webs, tell her lies. She could try to reach me with soldiers, lawyers, or words. But I had survived her worst. And survival, I finally understood, was its own quiet victory. Still, as the stars pricked through the night sky, I whispered to the wind, almost like a prayer, "Goodbye, Rachel. For good, this time." The years that followed blurred into seasons, each one quieter than the last. My health steadied with the right pills. My pills. And the rhythm of life became simple again. Mornings on the porch with coffee, afternoons in the garden, evenings by the fire with old books. But Rachel never left me, not fully. Her shadow lingered in every unopened envelope, in every phone call that made me tense before answering, in every dream where her voice hissed through the dark. I didn't hear from her directly again until her 10th year behind bars. The letter arrived in spring, hand-addressed but surprisingly calm in tone. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity and something softer, something that still clung to the memory of my daughter, made me slit it open. "Dad," it began. Not Thomas, not old man, just Dad. "I've had a lot of time to think. You probably won't believe me, but I see things clearer now. Anger got me here. Greed. I hated you for living when I wanted what you'd leave behind. Maybe that's what prison does. It strips you down until you see yourself for what you are. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry." The words blurred as I read them again and again. Part of me wanted to believe her. Another part whispered that she was manipulating me, softening me, planting seeds for her next attempt. I folded the letter neatly, placed it back in the envelope, and tucked it into the same box where her childhood photos now lay. Not forgiven, not forgotten. Just contained. 2 years later, I received news through Bennett. Rachel had been transferred. Protective custody. She'd tried to build her network again, but it had collapsed from within. Her so-called allies had betrayed her, and she'd been left alone, abandoned even by those who once swore loyalty. "She's finished," Bennett told me. "Whatever power she had, it's gone." I should have felt relief. Instead, what I felt was an odd, aching emptiness, like watching a storm break apart and scatter into harmless clouds after years of fearing its thunder. The last time I saw Rachel was not in court, nor in confrontation, but in a sterile prison visiting room. I hadn't planned to go, but curiosity gnawed at me until I finally agreed to the warden's request. She looked older, thinner, her fire dimmed but not gone. When she saw me, she didn't smirk or glare. She simply said, "Dad." I sat across from her, the table between us a gulf wider than oceans. "You asked me here?" I said. "Why?" She swallowed, her eyes glistening in a way I hadn't seen since she was a child. "Because I wanted you to know I understand now. You were right. About everything. And I hate myself for what I did to you." Her voice cracked, and for the first time, I didn't see the predator or the schemer. I saw my daughter, broken. But forgiveness didn't come easily. "I survived you," I said softly. "And that's all I needed to do. I don't know if I can forgive you, but I can leave you here and walk out of this room lighter than I came in." She nodded, a single tear sliding down her cheek. She didn't beg. She didn't argue. She just lowered her head. When I left the prison that day, the sky was wide and blue, the sun warm on my face. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was carrying her weight with me. Rachel remained where she belonged, and I went home to my porch, my garden, my quiet. The war was over, and survival in the end was victory enough. The boy who inherited the land wasn't your boy anymore by the time my affairs were settled. His name was Samuel, though everyone in the town called him Sam. When I first met him, he was lanky and shy, a kid who fixed my fence with nothing more than a borrowed hammer and an eagerness to help. By the time the estate passed into his hands, he was a man in his 30s, with calloused palms, steady eyes, and a small family of his own. The first time he walked the property after it became his wife and little girl at his side, the town gossiped. "Why him?" some asked. "Why not Blood?" But others remembered. They remembered the trial, the poison, the daughter who had tried to kill her father. They remembered the years I spent fighting shadows and whispers. And slowly, the murmurs faded into something like respect. Sam didn't squander the land. He expanded the garden I'd once tended with trembling hands, planting rows of apple trees and grapevines. He repaired the barn and opened it for community gatherings, barn dances in summer, Thanksgiving dinners in the fall. The old farmhouse, once a fortress where I stood watch against Rachel's schemes, became a place of laughter and welcome again. One summer evening, Sam's little girl, bright-eyed, no older than Rachel had been when she first scribbled dreams in her diary, found the sealed box in the attic. "Daddy?" she asked, carrying it down. "What's in here?" Sam set the box on the table and brushed the dust from the lid. He opened it carefully, finding the photographs, the old letters, the diary with its broken lock. His wife glanced at him, uncertain. Sam sighed, looking at the images of a girl who smiled wide at birthdays, who stood proud in her cap and gown. Then he read the first venomous letter, the handwriting sharp and angry. His daughter leaned close, not understanding. He closed the box gently. "This," he said softly, "is a story about choices, about how sometimes even family can lose their way." The girl frowned. "Is she family?" "She was," Sam said. "But the man who lived here before us, he survived her. He showed that we don't have to be trapped by the bad choices of others. We can make better ones. The girl thought about that, then nodded as only children can, simple and sure. Sam put the box back in the attic, but from then on, he carried the story in his heart. Not as a curse, not as a weight, but as a warning. Greed and bitterness rot the soul, while kindness builds legacies. Years later, when his daughter was grown and the farm was thriving, she told the story herself. How a man had been betrayed by his own blood, yet refused to let betrayal define him. She told it not with anger, but with reverence, as though passing down a lantern lit long ago. And so the story of Rachel faded into a cautionary tale whispered in the town's history, while the story of survival, my story, lived on in the laughter of children under apple trees, in the warmth of neighbors gathered in the barn, in every kind act that flowed from the land I'd once defended like a fortress. Blood had tried to destroy it, but legacy, in the end, was chosen, and mine endured. Over time, the story slipped from whispered gossip into something larger, something woven into the fabric of the town itself. At first, it was just an anecdote told by old-timers at the diner over coffee. You know that farm over there? Belonged to Thomas Callahan. His own daughter tried to kill him for his money. Didn't work. He left it all to a neighbor boy who actually cared. But stories have a way of growing. By the time Sam's daughter was in high school, the tale had become something of a local legend. Teachers used it when talking about morality. Pastors folded it into sermons about greed and honor. The farm itself became almost hallowed ground, not because of tragedy, but because it had survived tragedy and become a place of good again. Children dared each other to peek into the old attic where the box of letters still sat. Some said the ghost of Rachel wandered there, bitter and restless. Others said if you stood by the apple trees at dusk, you could hear Thomas's voice whispering, "Survive no matter what." Sam never encouraged the ghost stories, but he didn't silence them either. He knew legends had their place. What mattered was the truth that anchored them. Greed can destroy, but resilience can outlast even betrayal. On the 50th anniversary of the barn's reopening, the town gathered for a festival. There were food stalls, music, dancing. At sundown, Sam's daughter, now a woman grown with children of her own, stood on the makeshift stage inside the barn and told the story as she had heard it all her life. She spoke of Thomas Callahan, a man betrayed by blood, but not broken. She spoke of Rachel, not with hatred, but as a warning of what happens when the heart is consumed by greed. And she spoke of legacy, not the wealth passed down, but the strength of character, the choice to give the land to those who would nurture it instead of poison it. The barn was silent when she finished, every face lit by lantern light, every eye thoughtful. Then the applause came, steady, thunderous, heartfelt. That night, as stars spread across the sky, Sam walked through the orchard. He paused beneath the first apple tree he'd planted, the one his daughter used to climb as a child. He looked toward the house, its windows glowing warm, and he thought of me. "Rest easy, old man," he murmured. "Your story's safe. It'll outlive us all." And it did. For long after the names faded from gravestones, long after the letters in the attic yellowed and crumbled, the story lived on. Parents told it to their children, who told it to theirs, not just as history, but as a compass pointing to a truth older than time. Blood may betray you, shadows may try to consume you, but legacy is not inherited. It is chosen, and chosen well, it endures forever. Generations rolled on, and with them, the tale of Thomas Callahan, the man who outlived his daughter's betrayal, shifted once more. By the time Sam's grandchildren were old enough to chase fireflies in the orchard, the story had grown into something almost folkloric. The facts blurred, embroidered by time and imagination, until no one could quite separate history from myth. Some told it as a cautionary parable. Beware the hunger of greed, for even family can turn into wolves. Others made it darker. Children whispered at sleepovers that Rachel S. ghost still wandered the attic, searching for the inheritance she'd been denied. They swore that if you opened the wrong box at midnight, you'd hear the scratch of her pen writing new letters of revenge. At harvest festivals, storytellers gathered in the barn Sam had rebuilt, spinning the tale in candlelight. Each version leaned a little differently. Some painted Thomas as a frail old man who outwitted his daughter with nothing but patience and wit. Others cast him as a hardened soldier who fought off assassins with a cane and shotgun. In every telling, though, one truth remained. He survived her. One winter night, decades later, a traveling folklorist stopped at the town library. He listened as the locals recited the legend, scribbling notes furiously. "It's remarkable," he said, adjusting his spectacles. "How one man's tragedy has become a moral fable for a whole community. This is how myths begin, when truth becomes a torch passed from hand to hand. And so it spread beyond the town. The story found its way into regional anthologies, then into state folklore collections. College students debated it in ethics classes. Writers borrowed its bones for novels and plays. Thomas Callahan and his daughter Rachel became archetypes, the survivor and the betrayer. In some versions, Thomas was saintly, Rachel a monster. In others, Rachel was painted as tragic, corrupted by poverty, desperation, or madness, and Thomas as a stern figure who loved too little, too late. Every retelling revealed more about the teller than the truth. But the farm still stood, the orchard bloomed, and the descendants of Sam, who bore no Callahan blood but carried the weight of his legacy, still gathered neighbors in the barn every fall to tell the tale the way Thomas had lived it. Raw, painful, and true. One autumn, Sam's great-granddaughter stood before the crowd, lanterns glowing behind her. She held up a yellowed letter, fragile but legible, one of Rachel's venomous notes preserved in the attic box. "This," she said, her voice clear and strong, "is what greed sounds like. And this," she gestured to the orchard, the barn, the laughter outside, "is what survival builds instead." The crowd fell silent, and in that silence, Thomas Callahan's victory echoed across time. Not the victory of wealth or revenge, but of endurance, of choosing legacy over blood, of planting light where shadows once tried to reign. And so, in the folklore of the region, his story was no longer simply a man who survived his daughter's betrayal. It became a myth about how survival itself is a kind of immortality, because even when names fade and facts blur, the lesson remains. Blood may betray. Shadows may linger, but the choices we make outlast us. And some choices, chosen well, become legend. And so, the tale of Thomas Callahan reached its final resting place. Not in courtrooms, not in prisons, not in whispered threats under the cover of night, but in the enduring memory of those who chose to carry it forward. Rachel's betrayal had been meant to end him, to reduce his life to nothing more than a stepping stone for her greed. Yet in the end, she took nothing, and he lost nothing that truly mattered. His survival was more than breath. It was the seed of a legacy stronger than blood. Through neighbors, through children not his by name but by choice, his story lived on, reshaped into a beacon. A warning that greed corrodes even the deepest bonds, and a testament that resilience, truth, and integrity can outlast even the cruelest betrayals. The orchard bloomed, the barn filled with laughter, and his name became more than history. It became lesson, legend, and light. Thomas Callahan had been betrayed, but he had not been broken. And in surviving, he claimed the only victory that matters. A legacy untarnished. A story that endured, a life that, despite the shadows, ended in peace.